I've always been the kind of person who likes to take risks. Nothing too crazy, but you know, the thrill of trying something different. My name's Kayla, I'm 19, and I just moved to a new city for college. It's my first time living alone, and to be honest, it's been amazing. Until this happened. It started because I needed a desk. I had been using an old coffee table as my study spot, but my back was killing me. As a broke college student, there was no way I was buying anything brand new. So, I did what any other cheap person would do. I checked Craigslist. I spent hours scrolling through posts, filtering for something in my budget and not too far from my apartment. Eventually, I found the perfect one. A sturdy wooden desk, barely used, and only $30. The ad said, "Must pick up tonight." It felt like a steal, so I immediately emailed the seller. He responded within minutes. The guy's name was Evan, and he seemed normal enough at first. He mentioned he was moving and needed to get rid of some furniture fast. I asked for the address, and he sent it over. It was only about 15 minutes away from my apartment, so I figured, why not? But here's where things got weird. He added, "Come alone. I don't like too many people in my house." Okay, that should have been a red flag, right? But I brushed it off. Maybe he was just a private guy, or maybe his house was messy. Either way, I wanted the desk. I showed up around 8 p.m., just as the sun was setting. His house was in a quiet, older neighborhood where the streetlights flickered just a little too much. I parked my car in the driveway and texted him, "Hey, I'm here." He replied, "Door's open. Come in?" I froze for a second. I mean, who just leaves their door open for strangers? But instead of driving away like a normal person, I convinced myself it was fine. I needed that desk. When I stepped inside, the place was dark. The only light came from a dim lamp in the living room. The air smelled damp, like old wood and something else. Something metallic, maybe. "Hello?" I called out. No answer. That's when I noticed something strange. The walls in the living room were covered in old newspaper clippings, but not normal ones. They were all about missing people. Headlines like, "Teen vanishes without a trace," and "College student disappears after night out." My stomach dropped. What kind of person decorates their house like this? I called out again, louder this time. "Evan? I'm here for the desk." Finally, I heard footsteps coming from the back of the house. They were slow and heavy, like whoever was walking didn't care if I heard them. A tall guy stepped into the light. He looked to be in his mid-30s, with messy brown hair and this weird smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You're Kayla, right?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, my voice shaking a little. "Is the desk still available?" He nodded and motioned for me to follow him. Against my better judgment, I did. He led me down a narrow hallway to a small, windowless room. The desk was there, all right, but something felt off. The room was completely empty, except for the desk, chair, and a large, heavy-looking padlock on the door from the inside. "Go ahead and take a look," he said. I stepped into the room, trying not to freak out. The desk was exactly like the pictures, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. That's when I noticed something on the floor. A single, worn-out sneaker. It was small, like it belonged to a kid or maybe a teenager. My heart started pounding. "Is someone else here?" I asked, turning to face him. His smile widened, and he took a step closer to me. "Why do you ask?" At that moment, I didn't care about the desk anymore. I needed to get out of there. I mumbled something about forgetting my wallet in the car and bolted for the front door. As I reached for the handle, I realized it wasn't moving. It was locked. "Leaving so soon?" Evan's voice came from behind me. I spun around and he was just standing there holding a set of keys. His face was completely blank now, like all the fake friendliness had melted away. My hands were shaking as I fumbled for my phone, but before I could call for 911, he lunged at me. I screamed and dodged him, running down the hallway toward what I hoped was a back door. My adrenaline was the only thing keeping me moving. I could hear his footsteps behind me, getting closer. Then, by some miracle, I found a sliding glass door in the kitchen. I yanked it open and ran as fast as I could into the backyard. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. I jumped in, locked the doors, and sped out of there, not even caring about the noise my tires made on the driveway. When I got home, I reported the incident to the police. They went to the house the next day, but Evan was gone. The place was completely cleared out, like he'd never been there. But here's the thing that still keeps me up at night. A few days later, I was scrolling through the news when I saw a story about a missing girl. She looked familiar, too familiar. And then, it hit me. Her picture was on one of the newspaper clippings in Evan's house. I don't know who Evan really was or how many people he's hurt, but I do know one thing. I'll never, ever use Craigslist again. I was 22 and broke, like ramen every day broke. I had just moved to this tiny city for college and couldn't afford much for my apartment, so I was scouring Craigslist for cheap furniture. One night, I stumbled across this post. Free couch, good condition, must pick up tonight. It was perfect. The post had one picture, a tan sectional that looked clean enough, and the description was pretty standard. But the weird part? No address, just a phone number. I texted the guy immediately. He responded quickly. You want it? Come to 3237 Westland Drive, back alley. That should have been my first red flag. I mean, who gives away a decent couch and insists you pick it up from an alley? But I was desperate and too naive to care. Plus, it was already 9 p.m. And I figured someone else might grab it if I waited until morning. I borrowed my roommate's truck and headed out. The neighborhood wasn't great. Dimly lit streets, run-down houses, and barely anyone around. When I reached Westland Drive, I slowed down to find the alley. It wasn't easy to spot, but eventually I saw a narrow, shadowy lane between two boarded-up houses. I texted the guy. Here, where's the couch? His reply came almost instantly. Drive down the alley. I'll help you load it. Now, any sane person would have noped out of there. But again, I was broke, and this couch was free. So I turned into the alley. My headlights barely cut through the darkness, and the walls on either side felt like they were closing in. About halfway down, I saw it. The couch. It was sitting under a flickering streetlight, right in the middle of the alley. No one was around. I stopped the truck and got out. The couch looked the same as in the picture, maybe a little dirtier. It smelled weird too, like damp fabric and something else I couldn't place. I looked around and called out, "Hey, I'm here for the couch." No answer. I texted again. "I see the couch. Where are you?" This time, he didn't reply. Something about the whole situation felt wrong. The silence, the smell, the way the couch was just sitting there like it had been waiting for me. But I told myself I was overthinking it. I grabbed one end of the couch and started dragging it toward the truck. As soon as I touched it, I froze. The fabric was damp, not just from the smell, but actually wet and sticky. My stomach churned as I pulled my hand back. My palm was smeared with something dark. Blood. I stumbled back, heart racing. I reached for my phone to call 911, but before I could unlock it, I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps. I whipped around, expecting to see someone, but the alley was empty. "Hello?" I shouted, trying to sound confident, but my voice cracked. The footsteps stopped. Then, from behind me, a low voice whispered, "You shouldn't have come here." I spun around, but no one was there. At that point, I didn't care about the couch or my bank account. I bolted to the truck, jumped in, and slammed the door shut. My hands were shaking as I started the engine and reversed out of the alley as fast as I could. When I finally got home, I parked the truck and sat there, trying to calm down. My phone buzzed, and I almost dropped it. It was a text from the same number. "Don't come back. Next time, you won't leave." I blocked the number, locked all my doors, and tried to forget about it. But a week later, I saw another Craigslist post. "Free chair, great condition. Must pick up tonight." The address? 3237 Westland Drive. I didn't sleep that night. I was 19 when it happened, fresh out of high school and desperate for work. My family wasn't exactly swimming in money, and college wasn't in the cards. So, when I came across an ad on Craigslist for a delivery job offering $300 a night, felt like a godsend. The ad was simple. No experience needed, cash paid up front, just a few late-night deliveries. All I had to do was meet the guy at a gas station about 20 minutes outside of town to pick up the goods. Now, I wasn't stupid. I knew Craigslist could be shady, but I figured it was probably some under-the-table stuff. Maybe liquor runs for house parties or something like that. The money was too good to pass up. The first night went smoothly enough. The guy I met, Tom, was older, maybe in his late 40s. He looked like he'd seen better days. Messy hair, hollow cheeks, and that kind of jittery energy you see in people who don't sleep much. He handed me a nondescript box and gave me an address, written on a sticky note. "Don't look in the box," he said. That was it. No small talk, no jokes, just a cold, flat tone that made my skin crawl. I nodded, took the box, and followed the GPS to a run-down apartment building on the edge of town. The guy who opened the door barely even looked at me. He just took the box, handed me an envelope stuffed with cash, and slammed the door. Easy money, right? The second night, things got weirder. Tom was waiting for me at the gas station again, but this time, he looked more paranoid. He kept glancing over his shoulder like someone was watching him. He handed me another box, this one heavier than the last. "Same deal," he said. "But if anyone follows you, don't go to the drop-off. Call me." That set off alarm bells. I asked him what was in the box, but he just stared at me with those sunken eyes of his and said, "You don't want to know." The address this time was out in the middle of nowhere, some old farmhouse miles off the main road. By the time I got there, it was pitch black. The driveway was long and unlit, and the house itself looked abandoned. When I knocked on the door, no one answered. I tried again, louder this time. Still nothing. That's when I heard the sound. Something moving inside, slow and deliberate, like someone dragging something heavy across the floor. I turned to leave, but the door creaked open behind me. A man stood there, tall and gaunt, with a blank expression that made my stomach drop. He didn't say a word, just held out his hand for the box. His fingernails were black, like they'd been dipped in ink, and his skin was pale and blotchy, almost gray. I handed him the box and he smiled, a wide, toothy grin that felt entirely wrong. He didn't close the door right away. Instead, he just stood there watching me as I walked back to my car. When I got in, I locked the doors and floored it out of there. By the third night, I was ready to quit. But $300 a night was too much to give up, so I went back. Tom wasn't there when I arrived at the gas station. Instead, there was a different guy waiting. A younger guy, maybe in his 30s, wearing a hoodie and baseball cap. He handed me the box without saying a word. I asked where Tom was, but the guy just shrugged and walked off. This time, the address was even further out, deep into the woods. The road was barely more than a dirt path, and my car's headlights barely cut through the darkness. When I finally reached the location, there was no house, just a clearing with an old, rusted-out trailer in the center. The windows were covered with black trash bags, and the whole place smelled like rotting meat. I didn't want to get out of the car, but I had to finish the job. I grabbed the box and walked up to the trailer. The closer I got, the more the stench made my stomach churn. I knocked on the door, but it swung open on its own. Inside, the walls were covered in strange symbols, scrawled in what looked like red paint, or maybe it wasn't paint. The air was thick and heavy, and I could hear something faint in the background, like whispering, but there was no one there. I set the box down on the floor and turned to leave. That's when I heard it. A low, guttural growl coming from the shadows in the back of the trailer. I didn't stick around to find out what it was. I ran back to my car and didn't look back. When I got home, I found a sticky note on my front door. It just said, "Stop asking questions." I never went back. If you enjoyed this story, you might want to check out our other videos and maybe consider subscribing. It really means a lot to the channel and helps us build a real community of horror lovers like you.